If I could go back in time to a big moment in physics, I would definitely choose to go to the 20th century Slovak conference and just stand here in this picture pretending that I am the coach of this brilliant team of minds that changed the way we understand nature, changed the way we understand science. So this was uh, one of the peaks moments in the 20th century, and I am going to choose from this picture here. I am going to choose the 11 players that I would include in my team. Um, the team of physicists from the 20th century. Of course, I'm not including here the brilliant minds of Kepler, Newton, Galileo Galilei, Michael Faraday, James Clerk Maxwell. Those are in the previous century. So this is the team. I am going to pick all of them from here. I am just going to import one scientist that deserved to be here. So let's look at the dream team for physics. I have chosen 11 because one is going to be the coach, and I am buying one, like I said. So goalkeeper, Madame Curie. Madame Curie, because she was a woman in a time where it was very difficult to be a scientist and a woman, or first a woman and a scientist. She had a lot of difficulties to change the mind of the scientist, not only because they were very wrong about the idea that the atom was stable. She discovered the instability of the atom, the possibility of using this energy, and she suffered the consequences of radioactivity, and she suffered the consequences of living in a time where it was very hard to be a woman and a scientist. So less curious about people, more curious about ideas. Goalkeeper, Madame Curie, twice Nobel Prize of Physics and Chemistry. Second, defense, Schrödinger. He discovered the nature of matter as a wave function. Everything in the universe is a wave function, he said. And what is interesting about Schrödinger is the inspiration that he got from the Vedanta philosophy. The Vedas teach that we are more than physical bodies operating according to the laws of physics and chemistry. We, the eternal conscious self, are inherently connected to the greater whole. Schrödinger, in speaking of a universe in which particles are represented by wave functions, said, the unity and continuity of Vedanta are reflected in the unity and continuity of waves mechanics. So very interesting human being, very interesting character, defense for my dream team. Pauli, the best that most of us can hope to achieve in physics is simply to misunderstand at a deeper level. I love that quote. Pauli, also, number 3 in my team, he is the author of the exclusion principle. The exclusion principle explains the whole of the chemistry. The fact that just by changing one electron in an atom, the whole of the properties of the atom changes, just adding one proton, one electron. The exclusion principle states that fermions, in simple terms electrons, can only occupy a certain quantum number. 2 fermions or 2 electrons cannot be in the same place at the same time, occupying the same quantum number. So Pauli explains the diversity of nature by stating the exclusion principle. Number 4 in my team, another author of a principle the principle of uncertainty, Werner Heisenberg, he probably gave birth to quantum physics by stating that the momentum, when we observe an experiment, we are altering the experiment. This is what more or less Werner Heisenberg stated. If you want to look at an electron, you have to throw light at the electron, and therefore you will be affecting the momentum or the position of the electron. So it's impossible to know both at the same time. And the same principle could be stated with energy and time. I mean, the uncertainty to the amount of energy and the amount of time is limited. So if we're looking at particles that exist for a very, very small, short period of time, we could find out bigger amounts of energy. That means that particles can borrow energy, virtual particles can borrow energy from space and then pay it back. And this gives the explanation of the popping out into existence of matter and antimatter particles from space, from void. The ontology of materialism rested upon the illusion that the kind of existence, the direct actuality of the world around us, can be extrapolated into the atomic range. This extrapolation is impossible, however. So he discovered a limit to what we can understand. And then in the center, the midfield, Paul Dirac, one of the biggest minds in science, in physics, in maths, a very shy person. Dirac is known as a unit of silence. He spoke very little words, and he was able to synthesize the conflict between relativity and quantum physics in one equation. And that equation predicted, among other things, the existence of antimatter. So this equation here has all the beauty of simplicity, but it's very complex. Each term in this equation is very complicated. But he summarized, in this small equation, all the laws of nature except for gravity. So Paul Dirac, inspired in a meditative state by contemplating the fire in Cambridge, came with this equation that ended up knowing more than himself, according to his own words. Louis de Broglie, the hypothesis of the wave-particle duality, another game changer. Louis de Broglie, number 6 in my team. Two seemingly incompatible conceptions can each represent an aspect of the truth. Matter and waves can represent aspect of truth, the same aspect of truth. They are not incompatible. They may serve in turn to represent facts without ever entering into direct conflict. So he opened our minds to understanding the behavior of particles as waves. An electron can go through a tiny gap and produce diffraction, for instance. And this was experimentally proven, and the de Broglie hypothesis is used to determine the associated wavelength to any particle that is moving at a certain speed. Max Born, those who say that the study of science makes a man an atheist must be rather silly people. I believe that ideas such as absolute certitude, absolute exactness, final truth are figments of the imagination, which should not be admissible in any field of science. This loosening of thinking seems to me as the greatest blessing which modern science has given us. For the belief in a single truth and in being the possessor thereof is the root and cause of all evil in the world. Very, very interesting quote from Max Born. Niels Bohr. I go to the Upanishads to ask questions. Another great scientist that used the inspiration of the Eastern philosophy to understand. He had in his family badge, he has the yin and the yang. When we measure something, we are forcing an undetermined, undefined world to assume an experimental value. We are not measuring the world, we are creating it. This is This is very much connected to the Vedanta philosophy, what is written in the Upanishads, right? Maya, the word Maya, which means illusion, is the root for measure. So to measure is to create the illusion of reality. This is Vedanta philosophy to its maximum. So number 8 in my team, Niels Bohr. Number 9, Max Planck came with the hypothesis of the quantization of the Planck constant, the quantization of energy. And Einstein took these ideas very seriously. So again, another of the biggest minds in the century. All matter originates and exists only by virtue of a force. We must assume that behind this force, the existence of a conscious and intelligent mind. Again, consciousness is now embedded in science. This mind is the matrix of all matter. So you can no longer separate the observer from the object of observation and the process by which we observe. Max Planck. Number 9, running to score the goals. Number 10, the only man that is not in the picture in Slovak conference is this guy, Nikola Tesla. Probably not recognized at the time as a genius. He was a very important experimental physicist. We owe to him a lot of the discoveries of the modern world. And look what it says. Look what he says. All perceptible matter comes from a primary substance, a tenuity beyond conception, filling all space. The Akasha, this is Sanskrit, Akasha, or luminous ether, which is acted upon by the life-giving prana, or creative force, calling into existence in never-ending cycles of all things and phenomena. So prana, akasha, these Sanskrit words are also from the Vedanta philosophy, inspiring this brilliant mind. He understood that space is not empty, that space is filled with energy. And that energy is the one that particles borrow to pop out into existence. He understood the essence of how matter pops into existence. And he also understood the electromagnetic effect. Nikola Tesla is responsible for us using alternate energy to generate electricity all over the world, and many other things, including the light bulb, which was attributed to Edison. So one of the biggest minds, number 10, and of course number 11, the one that collected all the knowledge from all the players and hit all the goals. Albert Einstein not only came in 1905 with 3 brilliant papers explaining the nature of atoms, with Brownian motion, explaining the photoelectric effect, that means the quantum nature of light with the photoelectric effect, and explaining the nature of space and time with special relativity. And then in 1905 came with the biggest theory of general relativity that explains everything in the macrocosmos and changes the way we understand nature and space and time. Albert Einstein also discovered fundamental principles in nature, like the principle of relativity that states that the laws of nature are true, universal. The principle of the constant of velocity, he took Max Planck's equation seriously and stated as a principle that the velocity of light is constant regardless of where the source is or how the source is moving. And the principle of equivalence, stating that inertial acceleration and gravitational acceleration are equivalent. It is the same to be standing on a lift that accelerates upwards than to be standing on a gravitational field due to the mass of a body. It is equivalent. So these principles that understood in depth the unity of nature were stated by one single mind, and then the biggest theories. We are slowed down sound and light waves, a walking bundle of frequencies tuned into the cosmos. We are souls dressed up in sacred biochemical garments, and our bodies are the instruments through which our souls play their music. Albert Einstein says that a lot of his ideas came from that state of meditative state while he was playing the violin. So again, that cosmic religious feeling in the strongest and noblest motive of scientific research. That's what he maintained. Again, the importance of faith and having this religious feeling, that connection with nature that comes from the Vedanta philosophy that also inspired Albert Einstein. Albert Einstein read the Upanishads and the Bhagavad Gita, and he says, "This changed my life." So these are the 11 players in my team. If I have to choose a coach, I think the guru, the master of all these was Lawrence. Lawrence was older than them. I cannot but regard the ether, which can be the seat of an electromagnetic field, with its energy and its vibrations, as endowed with a certain degree of substantiality, however different it might be from all ordinary matter. In a way, Lawrence had the idea that space was this, what we call space or ether, had the secret that we now discover as dark energy. So Henrik Lawrence, I'll just give him the coach role in this wonderful team, and that is, 12 brilliant minds, all from the same century. 11 of them were captured in one picture, and that picture is this picture here. The Solvay Conference 1927, where they all gathered to figure out how to understand, how to explain nature. When you understand nature, you understand a little bit more about yourselves.